It was early January when I decided to spend 3 nights at my family's old cabin, deep in the wilderness of Montana. The place had been in the family for generations, built by my grandparents and maintained over the years as a quiet retreat. Nothing extravagant, just a simple off-the-grid getaway. To get there, I had to take a snowmobile miles from the nearest road, completely cutting myself off from the rest of the world. When I arrived, I wasted no time firing up the wood stove, unpacking my gear, and settling in. Within minutes, I felt the relief I had been craving. Time slowed down, and the silence of the forest wrapped around me. That first day and night were peaceful, exactly what I needed. The only sounds were the crackling fire and the occasional howl of the wind. The next morning, just after sunrise, I made breakfast on the wood stove and bundled up to fetch more firewood from the shed. But as soon as I opened the cabin door, I froze. There were footprints in the snow. They led straight up to the cabin's front porch. My stomach tightened. I had arrived the previous afternoon, and there had been no tracks then. That meant someone had come by during the night. But how? The nearest road was miles away, and there was no sign of a snowmobile or vehicle. Whoever had left those prints had walked through the wilderness, alone. In the dark, in the dead of winter, I stepped outside cautiously, scanning the tree line. The footprints didn't go back toward the road. They vanished into the dense woods. My breath came in slow, cold puffs as I followed the trail for a few yards before stopping myself. What was I doing? If someone had come this far just to stand outside my cabin, they hadn't done it by accident. I forced myself to shake it off. Maybe it was a lost hiker or a hunter passing through. If they meant harm, they would have done something already, right? I grabbed the firewood, went inside and locked the door behind me. I debated leaving, but the trek back was long and grueling. I told myself I'd stay vigilant, keep an eye out. A few hours passed with no sign of movement. The sun climbed higher, and the tension in my chest eased. By midday, I decided to take a walk, maybe track where the footprints led. If I found another cabin or an old campsite, at least I'd have an explanation. I followed the prints deeper into the forest, the trees growing taller, the silence thickening. The trail was long and uninterrupted, no signs of turning back. Then, just ahead, I heard it. A single footstep. I stopped dead in my tracks, my breath hitching. The sound had come from up ahead, just beyond the trees. But when I looked, there was nothing. Just the endless expanse of snow and woods. My heart pounded in my ears as the realization settled in. Someone was out there, watching, hiding. The forest was silent again, too silent. I knew what I had heard, and whoever made that noise knew I was there. Hello? My voice barely carried through the still air. No answer, no movement. Just an unbearable, suffocating quiet. The hairs on my arms stood up. I wasn't alone, and I had no idea who or what was just beyond the trees. Panic surged through me. I turned and sprinted back toward the cabin, barely stopping to breathe. The moment I got inside, I packed my things with shaking hands, locked the door, and jumped onto my snowmobile. I didn't look back as I sped toward the road. I never told my family what happened that day, and I haven't been back to that cabin since. But sometimes, late at night, I still think about those footprints in the snow, and the sound of that single, deliberate step breaking the silence of the woods. Whoever or whatever was out there that night, they weren't lost. They were looking for something or someone. Every year, around the end of February, my good friend Justin and I take a camping trip to the same remote spot. We've both done a lot of backpacking and camping, but there's something uniquely eerie about a snowy forest at night. With the right gear, it's not unsafe, but the isolation always carries a strange weight. This year we arrived, set up our tents, built a fire and settled in with a couple of drinks. The woods stretched out in every direction, silent except for the occasional crackle of the flames. Then, without warning, we heard it. A scream. It tore through the still air, distant yet chilling, echoing across the landscape. It lasted only a few seconds before the forest swallowed it whole. Justin and I jolted upright, exchanging uneasy glances. It sounded human, but impossibly far from where anyone should be. We scanned the darkness, but the trees gave nothing away. Probably an animal, Justin muttered, trying to sound confident. Some of them can sound almost human. I wasn't so sure, but what could we do? The sound was too far to track, and neither of us was eager to go wandering after it. So we waited. The sun dipped below the horizon. The cold thickened. We added more wood to the fire and tried to push the scream from our minds. Then it came again, closer, maybe 200 feet away. A deep dread settled in. We couldn't just ignore it anymore. If someone was out there, they could be hurt, or worse. Gripping my knife, I bundled up, and we moved cautiously into the woods. The snow crunched beneath our boots as we followed the direction of the scream, our breath fogging in the freezing air. The trees loomed taller, their skeletal branches clawing at the sky. We had gone maybe 150 feet when it happened again. This time, it was right next to us. I froze. My pulse pounded in my ears as my eyes darted through the trees. Nothing. The forest was empty, silent. Justin and I stood motionless for what felt like an eternity. Then, he took a step forward and stopped. I saw it too. A deer carcass lay sprawled in the snow. Fresh blood, stark against the white. Its body was mangled, twisted unnaturally. Then Justin's hand gripped my shoulder, hard. I followed his gaze. Just beyond the trees, a figure stood watching us. He wore almost no winter clothing, no coat, no gloves, just a tattered shirt and pants, soaked and stiff from the cold. His posture was unnerving, head tilted slightly as if studying us. His breath didn't fog in the air. For a long, horrible moment, none of us moved. Then Justin tugged at my arm. We turned and ran. Neither of us spoke as we tore back to camp, throwing our gear into our packs with shaking hands. Within minutes, we were gone, our footsteps vanishing into the dark. We never went back to that spot again. We never spoke about what we saw. But sometimes, when the wind howls through the trees, I swear I can still hear that scream.